Welcome aboard Flight 264. We will be
In the course of air travel, it's common for a journey to take an hour or possibly several hours, depending on the distance to the intended destination. However, it's not rational for a trip to last days or even months. It's downright implausible for a journey to extend for years, for instance. But what about a journey lasting nearly 4 decades? Today's story revolves around the most famous and peculiar journey in the history of aviation. Flight 914. What is the truth behind it? On an ordinary routine day, Juan de la Corte, an air traffic control officer at Caracas International Airport in Venezuela, noticed an unfamiliar black spot on his control screen. After further investigation, it turned out to be an aircraft that hadn't previously appeared on the radar, headed toward the airport. This plane seemed to have emerged from thin air, with no known flight path. Suddenly, a communication arrived from the aircraft itself, comprising just 2 words. "Where are we?" The voice sounded distressed and anxious, prompting the officer to respond with a question of his own. "Where is this aircraft headed?" Without delay, a stunning reply followed. "We are Flight 914 to America, operated by Pan American Airlines. We're en route from New York to Miami, Florida, with a crew of 4 and 57 passengers." This response left the control team in shock. What was an American aircraft doing on Venezuelan airspace, over 1,800 kilometers away? "This is Caracas, Venezuela, in South America. Are you in some sort of trouble?" the officer inquired. "Caracas? How can that be?" After a few minutes, the DC-4 aircraft touched down on one of the runways at Caracas International Airport. The voice of the pilot, a mixture of astonishment and fear, came through to Juan. "Oh my God! Jimmy, what the hell is this? A missile?" The crew of Flight 914 looked out at a modern jet taking off from an adjacent runway. Then the pilot shouted to the officer, "We're Flight 914. We were supposed to be at Miami Airport at 9:55 a.m. on July 2nd, 1955. How on earth did we end up in Caracas? Something unnatural is happening here." The officer attempted to reassure the pilot, stating that the ground crew was on their way to assist them. He emphasized the need for the pilots to remain calm. However, the pilot's response was stern and came through the open cockpit window. "Stay away from us. We're going to fly far away." Without seeking permission or adhering to safety protocols, the pilot immediately took off with the plane, disappearing from sight in no time. Later on, ground service workers reported seeing passengers pressing against the windows, and the pilot opened the cockpit window, motioning for them to move away. Officer Juan de la Corte also mentioned that he was waving what appeared to be a file that had fallen from his hand, which was later identified as a calendar. Then the pilot started the engines, and the aircraft took off. Interestingly, the fallen calendar was dated to the year 1955. What is this flight, and what happened to it? On July 2nd, 1955, Flight 914, operated by Pan American Airlines, departed from New York to Miami with 57 passengers and a crew of 4. The journey began normally, but as hours turned into more hours, the plane vanished from both the skies and the radar screens. There were no distress signals or technical issues reported, causing anxiety among Miami's controllers. They contacted air traffic controllers in New York, who confirmed that the plane had disappeared from their radar, leaving no trace. Authorities launched an intense search for the plane or its wreckage, trying to detect any signal. Months of searching yielded nothing. Flight 914 had seemingly evaporated, as if it had never existed. Authorities concluded that the plane had likely crashed in a remote area of the ocean that was beyond search and rescue capabilities. This tragedy claimed the lives of 58 people, and its causes and details remained a mystery. Analysis relied on mere guesses and beliefs, as officials couldn't conceive in their wildest theories that Flight 914 hadn't reached its destination in Florida because it was still flying the same flight path. Later, as previously mentioned, Flight 914 reappeared out of nowhere and landed at Caracas Airport in Venezuela, only to take off and disappear again. But where to? After 37 years of searching, Flight 914 finally landed at Miami Airport in Florida. Open-mouthed, wide-eyed, and bewildered, officials and staff at Miami Airport couldn't believe their eyes. Nearly 60 people who had vanished aboard a plane for decades suddenly reappeared. The astonishing part was that they hadn't visibly aged and were in the same state as when they departed, and yet they hadn't aged a day over all those years of travel. Despite their disbelief, there was no choice but to question everyone, both the crew and the passengers. All agreed that their last memory was being on a flight in the year 1955. They were sent on their way, assuming they'd reached their destinations after all those years of travel. Is the story of Flight 914 real? What's its secret? What logical explanation could account for an aircraft flying for 37 years while its occupants believed it had only been 3 hours? Many have attempted to solve the mystery of Flight 914, and various speculative theories have circulated, surpassing even the wildest imagination. One of the most prominent explanations was time travel through a wormhole or temporal tunnel, which transported the plane to Venezuela suddenly after 37 years, due to radar not picking it up. Other theories spread as well, such as the involvement of extraterrestrials in this incident, or the Bermuda Triangle being a possible cause behind the series of peculiar events that transpired. Amidst back-and-forth arguments and debates, all these hypotheses remain intact, with proponents and skeptics for each one. However, the only confirmed truth is that the mystery of Flight 914, the longest journey in history, still remains enigmatic. In this world, there are those who persist in attempting to unravel it even up to this moment.